Welcome to a football show, Monday edition. That is Zach Lyons, and I am Braden Gall. Welcome to the program. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. We are going to give you some names of players the Titans should stay away from. Boom or bust type guys, right? But bust is the popular term, but just players that maybe we don't want to see the Titans take in the first or second round. We're going to talk about that. We're going to dive into how the Titans should address the rest of their needs. We still have some free agents available. We have a whole nother offseason next season, potentially. We've got a draft coming up. We've got trades. We've got all kinds of ways the Titans could address these needs. So we're going to go back down that rabbit hole a little bit for some of their positional value, because I do think there is going to be a position or two, Zach, that the Titans just simply cannot fill during the draft. So we're going to have to discuss that because they still have plenty of holes. And then we're going to try a new way to look through each round of the draft through the Titans lens. And we're going to try to pinpoint a player the Titans should take in with each of their picks that we like at each position. We're going to start today with the offensive line, of course, the biggest position of need on the roster. So, Zach, good to see you. How are you, sir?
Doing good. As a lifelong fan of the basketball powerhouse that is Alabama, it is so great to see them in the Final Four and finally get their what they've had coming due to them for a long time now. Unfortunately, that means that other teams could not make it into the Final Four, whether that's because they were weak in the paint and were too focused on one guy instead of the rest of their own team and doing what they need to do. It's just nice that Alabama's finally, once again, big brother in another sport to University of Tennessee.
If Memphis and Alabama were playing in the Final Four, who you root for?
Oh, did you say Alabama and Memphis? We're playing
Alabama and Memphis. Yeah,
Memphis. I would listen.
Okay,
I'm always going to root for them.
So you're a fucking front runner, is what I'm hearing.
No, I will root for Alabama, but I will, even in football, I will root for Memphis over Alabama.
Okay, so then you're a Memphis fan, not an Alabama fan.
No, I'm an Alabama fan, but what I do for Memphis is I like to root for a team that has not won as much as my lifelong team has.
So Alabama basketball is like your second choice. So like they're the Ola Fashanu of your basketball rootings.
Yes, the 1B. The 1B.
Okay, well, I don't think
basketball doesn't really interest me either way. I've been on the record of that. I only have enjoyed college basketball when Memphis plays anyway. But for the sake of being able to dunk on all the UT fans,
sure.
Both sets of UT fans that are now in the SEC, it sure is nice that Alabama is yet again the basketball powerhouse that it used to be at one point in time, which is never, by the way, it has never been a basketball school.
No, and Alabama gets to the Final Four before Tennessee does in history. So
Michael Wagner's trying to tell me what I can and can't fucking do in America, so Michael Wagner can go screw himself.
Michael, thank you for chiming in. You can't have a 1B, he says. I completely agree. There are some loose guidelines to fandom, and you don't get a second team if you're a real fan.
If you want to say I can't have something, you can't then follow it up and say there's loose guidelines. It's got to be tight guidelines. So just because I have found a loophole that you guys have yet to find does not mean anything.
I just think, I think it makes you soft.
I have lifelong grown up an Alabama fan, raised in Alabama, 4 years old. You're asking preschool, what do you want? Who are you going to root for? Chose Alabama at Mars Hill Preschool down in Florence. I've been there since all this time, and I went to college at the University of Memphis. I can, in that situation, I can have two different fandoms that don't conflict with each other.
You are creating a good case according to the rules of fandom, which I alone have written for everyone.
Yeah.
And I alone can amend.
I don't live in your world. That's for 100%.
Oh, yeah, you do.
Sure. I live in a world where there's freedom. I allow freedom in our world.
So here's the deal. You cannot grow up in Atlanta, Georgia as a Dallas Cowboys fan unless you have a reason to be tied to the Dallas Cowboys. You can change your fandom based on what school you go to, which is what you're arguing, right? Which I think is a good argument. If you decide to go to the University of Tennessee like I did, and I grew up a Wisconsin fan, I switched to the University of Tennessee the second I stepped on campus. I didn't grow up a Tennessee fan. I didn't have generations of family rooting for Tennessee. But I think going to a school is clearly grounds for changing one's fandom legally. And again, these are my fucking rules. So legally, I think that's fair. If your father or mother or aunt or uncle or whoever it is that taught you about a sport passes that down to you, which is also your other one, it sounds like, if that is fair and legal
No.
in our world. You said you grew up a lifelong.
What other one? Yeah, when I literally just explained what happened.
Yeah,
You're at preschool,
and then went to Memphis.
Yeah, but my parents had nothing to do with it.
Fine.
The only part that they had to do with is that we moved to Alabama from Florida for a job. But my dad is a Kentucky basketball fan, and all that because he grew up and lived in Kentucky. So
sorry. What I should have said then is living in the area is absolutely a reason. Like I could, in theory, become a Titans fan if I wanted to, according to my rules, because I've lived in Nashville since 1996. I live in the area. I can go to games. I could take my kids to games. So if my kids wanted to break with family tradition and become Titans fans instead of Packers fans, even though that would break my heart as a Packers fan, I don't think it would break the rules of fandom. So I just wanted to get I wanted to get the Memphis, Alabama thing, because if I grew up a Wisconsin fan, but if they play Tennessee, it doesn't even come close to what I'm rooting for. As a Packers fan who also roots for the Titans because I live in Nashville, if they are playing in the Super Bowl, which is what I root for every year, is for the Packers to beat the Titans in the Super Bowl every year. Like that's what I would root for. And I think sort of cheering for your local team is allowed. Cheering for something that is passed down to you through whoever it is that taught you about the sport is allowed. If you live in the area, it's allowed. If you go to that school, it's allowed. But you cannot tell me that you grew up in, like, not you specifically, but you cannot tell me that you grew up in, like, I don't know, again, Atlanta, Georgia, and you're like a diehard Connecticut fan because they won a bunch of national championships with Jim Calhoun. Like, I think that's bullshit. Like, it's why we all hate Yankees fans and Duke fans and Notre Dame's fans and Dallas Cowboys fans and Florida State fans from the 90s, because you all just picked a team that won championships. And that's an easy out. That's an easy way to live. You know what's hard? Being a fucking Mets fan. That's hard. I didn't pick that.
Listen, like I said, been an Alabama fan since I was 4 years old or 3 years old, whenever that preschool year was when you were asked. And so that would have been back in 1989. So suck it. I guess I could do whatever I want.
Sinkers Beverages, everybody. Sinkers Beverages. The links to the draft party are in the YouTube chat right now. We are trying to beat the Hot Read podcast to 2,000 subscribers. We've got almost 2,000 subscribers on the YouTube page. We need you guys to go click subscribe. Hot Read's trying to get to 1,000, so we got to beat them to 2,000. All right, I'm turning it into a rivalry here. So make sure you go hit subscribe on the YouTube page. In the comments, there are 2 links. One to Thursday night's tickets to the NFL draft party hosted by Sinkers Beverages. There'll be all you can eat, all you can drink, $40. We're going to do a live show. We're going to hang out. About 30, 40 people can come hang out on Thursday night. We're going to cover the first round. Zach and I will be there. I'm hoping Stoney is okay at being there as well. And then on Friday, totally different energy, totally different vibe, all private, off-the-record conversation, special guest, 5 high-end bourbon flight tastings there, which is dangerous. And we're going to have sort of off-the-record content, off-the-record conversation, ask us anything, sort of round table discussion. Only 11 of you are getting in. A couple of those tickets have already been sold. They're a little bit more expensive, but I think you're going to get a lot more out of the equation on Friday night, just a little bit more toned down. So the links to buy both tickets are in the YouTube comments. That's the only place you can get to it. You can't get to it on the Sinkers website. You can't get to it on our socials yet. We are trying to give you, the loyal listeners, the first opportunity to buy those tickets. So, and it's all the money, by the way, going to charity. Sinkers Beverages, 440 Sports, F Words, Stacking the Inbox. We're all contributing all of our time and effort for free to make sure that we can raise some money for some charity. So Our Kids Center is the charity that will get all the money. So make sure you go check that out. The links are in the YouTube comments. So go. That's the only place you can get them right now. And then, of course, the Kingston Group. Shout out to the Kingston Group. BuildKG.com is the website. I don't need to tell you what to do with the Kingston Group. You already know. You've been listening to the show. The Kingston Group is just a name you need to know, and that's it. That's it. Elliot says, did you say there are 5 separate flights or one flight with 5 whiskeys? That's a good question. And if I confused you guys, I apologize. There should be 5 different high-end bourbons in a flight. Did I get that right?
Yes.
I think I got that right.
Yeah, it's more of a progression meal. It's not going to be brought to you all at once. It's
Right.
more of like, we're going to start with one, we're going to sip on it, we're going to talk, watch the draft, and then here comes the next one.
And I have this has not been I'm working on food for Friday night. That's going to be even better than last year. and last year we had great food.
Right.
But I'm working on a special food catering situation for Friday night. So stay tuned. You're going to want those tickets. I'm telling you guys. Also, I'm wearing the Sinkers hat right now. They've got 3 or 4 different styles. They got a blue one. They've got a couple other cool ones. They've got, this is the one I'm wearing here, is the black one. You can see the logo right there. There's the Sinkers logo, 1985. Bluegrass Beverages, of course, up in Hendersonville. So go get some merch as well. The merch is nice. I like the merch. Okay. Let's start with how to address their needs. And then we'll get into some busts that we want to stay away from, players we want to stay away from the Titans perspective. And then also we'll get into a position, a player at offensive line that we think the Titans can target in every single round. We're going to try this exercise and see how it goes, and then maybe work on some other positions before the draft rolls around. Filling the needs, Zach. What's the strategy the Titans should take here between free agency, the draft? I guess trading was an option since they went and got a corner. What's the strategy here?
Well, I think for safety, you need to get one in free agency. And I would normally say that's what you need to do for linebacker as well. But unfortunately, there is nobody there's nobody to get at linebacker. So you need to take a position off the board for the draft. Not necessarily like completely off the board, but you need to lessen your desire to draft one of these guys that's probably not going to be as good as what you can get free agency right now. So to me, I feel like there's going to be, now that Snead is getting introduced, his contract numbers should be coming like official for everybody. I feel like there's a couple other shoes to drop, whether they wait till after the draft and then dive back in. Maybe they let the draft dictate what they do in free agency. But I think that right now there's no reason to really wait around and not go ahead and sign a Justin Simmons or Marcus May if you can get him. I think Marcus May's the more legitimate shot. I think Julian Blackmon's out there as well. So all three of these guys, the longer they wait, the cheaper that they technically get. But also, the longer you wait, and let's say you wait till after the draft and you're a team that needs a safety and you don't draft a safety either, well, you kind of shifted leverage back to them. So I think it right now is like a weird time in the supply and demand where the demand is fruitful. The draft still kind of sucks. Might as well go ahead and get one of these guys that's capable starters. Justin Simmons is a multi-time All-Pro. Julian Blackmon is super young. He's one of the few guys that have been able to tackle Derrick Henry consistently. And then you have Marcus May, who has his own issues health-wise, a couple off-the-field instances that have been sorted out since, but those are out there.
Big hitter.
Bernard Wilson was part of the Jets that drafted him when they drafted Marcus May. There's a lot of connections right there. To me, it's just like head into the draft with as many holes filled as much as you can do, because you're going to have to get those guys anyway. There's not the way that you attack this draft. There's not going to be a way to find a starting safety without sacrificing another position that means more than safety.
And same thing for middle linebacker, frankly. But let me ask you about the safeties that are available. And obviously there's an easy answer here. They're asking for a lot of money. That could be the easy answer. But like the Packers signed Xavier McKinney, and I'm kind of like, I don't think he's significantly better than the names that are still available. Is he better?
Oh,
maybe.
Yeah,
probably.
He absolutely is.
Fine. But like, I don't love.
And they spent nothing on him comparatively.
Okay.
What you would have expected for him to get in the free agent market.
Okay,
so
well, then
I think that's one of the best deals in all of free agency is the Xavier McKinney deal.
Man, okay. I did not like spending $68 million on a safety. But my question is ultimately, and it sounds like your answer is significantly better, but why are these guys still available is the question, outside of, hey, they're asking for a bigger price tag. Because again, if one of these guys gets, let's say 2 years, 28 million, or pick a number, whatever the number is, that's still a significant drop off from the McKinney contract. And I guess my argument is the talent isn't as great as the drop off would be, if that makes sense. So I'm just
I'd only
curious.
say that for really Justin Simmons, but Justin Simmons is also getting closer to the Kevin Byard age where, you could be an all-pro all you want, but the game comes for you, especially at safety, quicker than other positions, just as quick as other positions. And we saw it with Kevin Byard. So I think that's the real issue. But I would say that the most part, I think it feels kind of like every team but the Titans has 2 safeties, maybe 3 safeties, and maybe not both safeties are of high quality that Justin Simmons is, for example, because that's the name that is really the cream of the crop, and same with Julian Blackmon. But again, we have talked about it on the show before, the impact of safety on the field week to week is not as impactful as it has been in the past because of how defenses are deployed. You can get guys that are athletic that maybe only have, limited on-field responsibilities to be able to cover a guy or, come down. You don't need an Ed Reed anymore. Those days of needing an Ed Reed or even the Kevin Byard isn't really there. That is a big need.
Are you saying
Depending on your team,
you could play more situational football? Is what you're saying with the position?
I look at it this way: you're taking less responsibility off a player, right? Like Kenneth Murray is see ball, hit ball, or see ball, get ball, see player, hit player. Your safeties can turn into that, and the Tennessee Titans have made has created a defensive backfield where maybe this is maybe what they're thinking. Maybe Elijah Molden can be that other safety, and we're not going to see that big of a drop off from a Justin Simmons to an Elijah Molden as far as impact on each individual play. There will be times that Justin Simmons shows up. Like a team, let's say the Tennessee Titans didn't have Cheeto. Last year's team could have used Justin Simmons more, and he would have made more of an impact than this year's team. And that's because of the players they've added in the defensive backfield. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think
it's a very situation dependent position, in my opinion.
I think you're right. Like if it's 3rd and 2 and they're playing 3 tight ends, Elijah Molden works fine. If they're going 4 wide and it's 3rd and 12, you need somebody, excuse me, with a little more range and maybe a little more height and a more ability to go deep cover 2 or whatever. Like I completely agree with what you're saying, that there's you can situationally you can play a little more flexibly at that position because of the corners they've got, and obviously with Hooker hopefully being healthy, and then again Molden being a guy that can do some of the things you need. I think so. I do think there's a position or two the Titans are just not going to be able to address in the draft. And if they can address middle linebacker, then maybe that's where you can go get a safety in free agency, because there are no free agents that are worth it at linebacker that are upgrades over what they have. But I don't think you can get both a safety and a linebacker in the draft. I don't think you can from a starting standpoint. Like I think you can get depth pieces.
It would be that's asking a lot of a rookie,
right?
Either way you go, unless you're going to sacrifice another position. That's the problem that you have, right? If you want to get Junior Colson, or if you want to get Tyler Nubin, that comes at the expense of a wide receiver. That comes at the expense of maybe a defensive lineman that could be more impactful. Yes, that fits a position of need, but they may not be the best player available at that time that you draft. You may have to give up Darius Robinson if you want Tyler Nubin, and honestly, stuff like that. They
might cancel each other out too. Like you can't get the linebacker and the safety who's a guaranteed starter, especially if you're picking at 38. Like to your point, those are two names that I thought of immediately at 38. Like could they be available? Probably. Could they both be starters for your team? Probably, but you can't get both of them. It's just it's not possible. So even if you get one, you're not going to get the other. So if you're not going to get one, it does feel like safety is the one that's available and give you better quality option in the free agent pool, whereas linebacker may be the one you want to draft, but you really don't want to draft one at 38. I still think there's a very good chance that this team does not have a linebacker at the end of the draft or free agency. They just don't.
I would
don't
be
have
a
an
little
answer.
surprised. I mean, it kind of depends. Like if they were to draft a Trevin Wallace, Jordan McGee, an Edifwan Ulofoshio, the Washington linebacker, like those guys, there's a bunch of guys that are baseline, borderline capable starters that this team with its surroundings can probably mask the deficiencies of a rookie linebacker in that way. But you're not going to have anybody close to an Azeez Al-Shaair, David Long, Jayon Brown this year, but there are guys that you can develop into that next year. But they can go ahead and take their licks now.
I think the point is that if you draft, excuse me, a McGee in, let's say, the 6th round, I'm just making this up here.
Yeah.
That guy is not automatically clearly better than Gibbons and Reese. he's going to battle.
Oh, no, he is. I mean, most of these guys are. Most of the guys I named are.
Let me finish. They aren't automatically guaranteed starters ahead of those guys, but they are in the competition and maybe will win the job. Yeah. And I would be fine with that if you say, hey, they draft McGee in the 6th round, he beats out Jack Gibbons. That would not be surprising at all. That's not. In fact, that's what you're hoping for if you're a Titans fan. In fact, I might put Reese ahead of Gibbons right now. So I think at safety, I think there's a better chance you can find a player in the 6th or 7th round that is a contributing member that does exactly what you just said, which is comes in when Elijah Molden isn't really suited for the situation. And that's not what you need at linebacker. You need somebody a little bit more, green dot-ish. Yeah. But there's none of those available really outside of picking in the first 2 rounds. There's no real way to go do that. And so I do think signing a safety frees you up to draft a linebacker. Is there anyone else is offensive line? Do they need to add some pieces, or are you in the draft 2 tackle camp?
I mean, I love the idea, and I don't know if it's really a feasible strategy. I just like the idea of going 2 tackles, whether that's first round, 4th round, or 2nd round, 4th round. I don't care, but I also think, again, it's probably down to money, but Andres Pete is a guy. Mekhi Becton is still out there. Cam Fleming. There's still guys out there that, again, the longer they're out there, the likelier their price comes down. So I guess all these teams are at a waiting game. And a lot of these players probably will have to wait till after the draft to see how things shake out. I tell you a guy that I wouldn't wait around to go get, and actually, let me move something. Yeah, Brian Spivey. Just brought his name up, and I brought it up. Carl Lawson, a guy that's familiar with Brian Callahan, who fits a position of need, who can kind of rotate in and out with Arden Key, makes a lot of sense. Because if Arden Key's already situational, and you add in another situational pass rusher that's young with high upside on a 1-year contract, that doesn't really solve the edge issue long term. But again, you have 2 players that are rotating in and out that are high quality, that maybe just that rotation works better than, drafting a Chris Braswell or something. It may just work out better for this year to do it like that.
And I think we've talked about this before, but you cannot fix everything to the point to which you are competing for a Super Bowl in one offseason. So a temporary fix is fine for this particular team going into this particular season. Maybe next year it needs to be a long-term solution at edge if you don't get one this year in the draft, like you said, a Braswell or Darius Robinson at 38, etc. Square Up asks, what about Cedric Gray? Could he wear the green dot later on? I've seen him ranked in the 130s, 140s, give or take, which is somewhere in the 4th or 5th round. If you can get him at 146, I could see that being an option. I don't think he's around for that. Is he 106? He doesn't strike me as a guy you take there, but quickly your thoughts on Cedric Gray out of, I believe it's North Carolina, and shout out to Square Up for his NC State Wolfpack getting to the Final Four.
I will have to say this about Cedric Gray. I like him more on film than I liked him in person at the Senior Bowl. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay if that's how your linebacker comes into your team. It's just for some reason, maybe the Senior Bowl, just bad week for the Senior Bowl. But I like what I see on film, and he's a guy that Curtis Jacobs. I can name a lot of linebackers that I like on day 3. I can name you more linebackers that I like on day 3 than probably any other position I like on day 1 or day 2. And that's just the state of the linebacker position itself, is filled with day 3 guys that I think can come in to certain teams, but specifically for the Tennessee Titans, and build themselves a nice career from the ground up in this system with Denard Wilson and these 3 cornerbacks. The 3 cornerbacks really change a lot for what you can do at the other positions.
And playing behind Jeffrey Simmons doesn't hurt either. Yeah. Can you say the same thing about
Joseph Day, as he correctly pointed out that the Titans PR team got that one wrong, but he corrected him and said it's Sebastian Joseph Day.
So do you see the same thing about safeties? Do you find yourself saying, man, there's a lot of options that in the 7th round that I really
hate the safety class from top to bottom. Give me that's what I thought. There's maybe 2 or 3 guys that I can kind of latch onto with some hope, but I think really, if you could probably find more safeties in the 7th round that could probably. I think there's going to be a lot of safeties on the 7th round compared to. It's just I don't know. I don't know how to put it into perspective without just saying like these guys just suck.
There's more quality depth at linebacker on day 3 than there is at safety. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, the safeties is just a terrible class this year.
And the top of the classes aren't much different. Linebackers a little bit better, but not by much.
Yeah.
So I agree. All of that says go get a safety if you want off the free agent market. And then you mentioned the offensive lineman as well. All right, we're gonna get into. I've got a random scenario I want to present to you, and I want to get your live reaction to that. We're gonna work our way through every draft slot. Pick 7, 38, 106, 146, 182, and all the 7th rounders on offensive line targets that we like. So we're going to study the offensive line in the back half in case they don't get one at 7 or in the first round. What happens? So we'll get to all that. But I want to know guys that you have circled, neon flashing lights. Stay away from them in the 1st and 2nd round. So the top 40 picks. I want you to tell me guys that just bust is the word we use, and it's okay if you say that. I don't mind. But basically just. This is not a guy that I'm really high on. I think he's overvalued. I think people are reaching for him, et cetera, whatever phraseology you want to use. I want to know guys you are absolutely staying away from in the 1st and 2nd round as I lose your wonderful face. Go to Sinkers Beverages, by the way, on the Kingston Group.
Stupid Google Chrome is messing up for whatever reason today. I tell you, one guy, if we're talking to guys that I do not want the Titans drafted in the 1st and 2nd round, I'll start with a pair of wide receivers that I think are terribly overrated, and that would be Adonai Mitchell and Keon Coleman. You've heard me talk about them before on here. You've heard me talk about them on Football and Other F Words. They are all physical specimen. They're like the opposite of body shaming. Like they are surface level, good looking wide receivers that have not put it together on the field consistently week to week. Adonai Mitchell, the more you get into the advanced stats, the more you get into his actual weekly game by game production, the way he's not a contested catch guy. The way that same for Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman can't separate. Neither of these guys are the very definition of what you were talking about, boom or bust. And if I'm the Tennessee Titans, I'm not drafting either of those guys at pick 38 or anywhere in the 1st round if they trade back or anything like that. So to me, those 2 wide receivers, I am so far out on. It's ridiculous. I just cannot. The more film I watch, the more data I read, the more that other people put out posts and talk about stuff that they have seen. I'm just like, these guys are just so boom or bust. The variance between the boom or bust is a Grand Canyon size gap. I think they are way more likely to be busts than they are to be booms. And I've heard people reference that, oh, you need to draft Keon Coleman, at pick 15 if you trade back and you're the Titans and he's still there. Pick him at 15 or 18. I'm like, no, there is no way the Tennessee Titans need to draft Keon Coleman. They need to draft guys that can at least generate some separation, or if they can't, can at least do contested catch situations, and neither of these guys can do that.
So I have a lot of receivers written down, but for both sort of 1st and 2nd round, but I'm going to kind of package them together kind of like you did, because I don't think Keon Coleman or Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell, are options for the Titans in the top 20. Could they be options for the Titans at 38? Maybe, but even then, I'm not on board with that. Now I'm off Adonai Mitchell altogether. I'm with you, and I would put Xavier Worthy in there as well. I don't think he is worth a pick. I
will say this: Worthy plays a lot bigger. Like he would rather run through you than run out of bounds. Now it doesn't always work, but I because he's a small guy. But I will say I think out of the 2, I've kind of switched early on in the college season. I was like, okay, AD Mitchell, I feel like is going to be the better pro than Xavier Worthy if I had to choose. Now I'm kind of like, I don't know. I think Xavier Worthy is going to land in a good spot where I think he's going to be the better pro than Adonai Mitchell.
If he's the 32nd pick to the Chiefs, then yes. But they also just went and got Hollywood Brown, so I don't know. But that's the thing.
If he picked 38 to the Titans, I'm all for it.
I don't know if I like
because
that.
The Titans need that. He's a guy that they could put in the slot, and the Titans need that guy.
I would rather. So if they're picking 38 at wide receiver, and this is not what the point of this exercise was supposed to be, but if we're picking at 38, there's a number of guys. Roman Wilson's not a guy I love, but he is an elite slot receiver, maybe the best slot receiver in the group. I like Ricky Pearsall as well. There's other guys I like that I think are the more complete player than Xavier Worthy, but Xavier Worthy does. I think the 4.2 is going to push him up boards and make him overvalued. That's what I think is going to happen. I think A.D. Mitchell, same thing. Keon Coleman's the one I think drops in the draft and I think actually becomes a value. And he's actually the player I like the most out of all these guys. But I think it's more closer to like pick 50 or mid 50s or late fit. Like if he's back at 48 or they trade back to 52 or something like that, then I can see Keon Coleman being a really good option. I like Coleman a lot more than you do. I'm with you on A.D. Mitchell. It sounds like you like Worthy a little bit more than me. I want to go to the first round though and say I don't want Brian Thomas at 13, 14, or 15. I don't want him at that rate. I think he benefited. I think he benefited from the offense. I think he benefited from Neighbors and Daniels. I think he benefited from defenses playing three deep the entire time. He had free range run off the line of scrimmage. He was wide open a lot of times because of the scheme and because of how tough it was to stop that entire offense. I don't think I actually would move Neighbors down a notch too. He's clearly wide receiver 3 for me on my board, and I'm not sure I would be fine with Neighbors at like 9. I don't know if I want him at 7, but again, we're talking
What's the
about
difference between 7 and 9?
A third round pick, maybe a third round pick. But ultimately, Thomas is the one I'm focused on. Thomas is the guy I don't think is worthy of the first round pick with a team that has Ridley and Hopkins and needs another position that I think is, as we get into this offensive line conversation, I think are graded higher than Brian Thomas overall. Now, if you trade back to 24. You trade back to 26, you trade back to 28, and now we're having a discussion about Brian Thomas versus Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas versus Xavier Worthy versus Troy Franklin, who's another name I would absolutely stay as far away from as possible. Troy Franklin is a one-trick pony that can do the one thing really well, but that's about it. Then I'm interested in Brian Thomas. But if you're telling me top 20, top 15, I think that's a risky play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that I would probably rather take a Marius Mims
also high risk
than Brian Thomas, right? Like I think I would rather take a Marius Mims over Brian Thomas. I don't know if I'm really set on that, but I could see what you're talking about. But I think Brian Thomas is a really, really good wide receiver. And I heard everything that you laid out and all that kind of stuff. But, I think the physicality, the athleticism, the what he's able to do with the ball in his hands at his size, the ability for the contested catches, the ability to turn it and be a home run hitter, that's just something you can't teach. And I don't know if the scheme is that much different. I don't feel like it's a scheme where you're just like, well, they're always open, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I feel like
they were open a lot.
They did enough off the off the line.
That's true.
To get open themselves. And they're also two physical not big, but two physical wide receivers with unmatched athleticism. I just find it really hard to turn that down at 15. I think there's a good debate to be had about, okay, let's say the Tennessee Titans were drafting at 15. Are you taking Mims, Fuaga, Troy Fautanu, or are you taking Brian Thomas? And I think that's a good debate that has no true clear answer. But I think I would probably side with Brian Thomas because I feel like there is a bigger drop off from Brian Thomas to what you get in the second round versus Mims and Patrick Paul or some of these other guys, Kings of Sumatia in the second round.
Okay, I see what you're saying. No, I do, and I could see that argument for sure. I think Neighbors and Thomas both have a lot of polish to go. I just think in general, I think they have a lot of work to do to sort of maximize like the DeAndre Hopkins football IQ, right? Like what makes DeAndre Hopkins special.
Based on that, something just popped in my head. There are high pedigree guys, obviously, because they're talked about in the top 15. Wouldn't you rather have the top 15 guy with the untapped potential and the athleticism, and he has the production to match in college, even if it is 1 year, than the guy with no flaws or the more higher floor, I guess you would say, but the way lower ceiling. Because to me, Ladd McConkey is the perfect example to be like the yin and yang Brian Thomas, right? Like Brian Thomas isn't polished, doesn't run all the routes, but he has everything else you want in a wide receiver.
Yep.
And the Ladd McConkey is the guy that he does everything perfectly. If you press him up at the line, and he's a slot only guy, but if you press him up at the line, he's probably not going to do much in the NFL. But he does everything else perfectly. He's a day one starter that you can get in round 2. But wouldn't you rather have Brian Thomas long haul?
It depends. At 38, I'd rather have McConkey than 15 with Thomas. But it's so. I love that you brought him up because I wrote down Ladd McConkey versus Brian Thomas because I think they're the two ends of the extremes of the type of prospect that we're talking about. And I can see Ladd McConkey having a long, productive career in the NFL. But I don't even think at 38 I want him. I would rather go Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, and take a little bit of a risk on a little bit more upside than sort of, to your point, knowing how high the floor is going to be, but maybe how low the ceiling is going to be. To me, here's what's interesting. Malik Neighbors at 7, Brian Thomas at 18, Ladd McConkey at 38. Which one do you like the best? And I might actually lean Thomas in the middle over Neighbors.
Because how low you put Brian Thomas. I don't know if he'll go that low, but how low you put Brian Thomas in that scenario, I'd go Brian Thomas.
I think to your original question, though, this is where we talk, and we weren't going to talk about this, but this is where we talk about the horizontal and the vertical big board. It is, where is Brian Thomas relative to tackles 3, 4, and 5? Yeah. And if Brian Thomas is like your number 3 tackle, right? You go with me here on this, right? If you've got Alt and whoever, Olu, and then Brian Thomas, or do you have Alt, Olu, Latham, Fuaga, then Brian Thomas? And I think I would have.
I'd probably lean that.
I would have Brian Thomas behind the top 4 tackles. That's what
for me. It's very much. It's more Fatanu, Mims. I think more than it is Fuaga and Latham and Thomas. You get what I'm saying? Like I think it's really more Mims and Fatanu.
So Mims is the only tackle name I wrote down that I could see being high bust category, because I don't think they're going to be taking the guys in the 20s. Like I don't expect them to be picking in the 20s. So if you're banking on Tyler Guyton to be your starting left tackle, there's plenty of risk in that. But I don't think that's what they're going to be doing. So if you're picking 14, 15, 16, 17, if you're picking 7 or 9 even, or 11, there's not a lot of names. I mean, look, Terrion Arnold is interesting to me because I think he's a great corner, but I don't like the pick in the first round because I think he's got a chance to draw a lot of penalties. I think he's going to need to develop, and they don't need him. So that's a name I don't really like there in the first round. Brock Bowers is a high risk player, also a ton of upside, and could be an elite playmaker in this league. But how many tight ends that are taken in the top 12 or 15 turn out to be Hall of Famers? I mean, Antonio Gates, like I don't know, like who else? And so that one I see being a lot of risk involved potentially. That's one that I may stay away from. And then Latu from UCLA is interesting to me because I think he's got a lot of things that I like about him. But when
I can't talk myself into him.
I can't either. If you lack speed and athleticism and power, I'm like, what? Like your IQ can only make up for so much, and if you're a pass rusher, you need one thing to be almost elite to be a first round draft pick. So I would not want to see them take Latu in the first round.
Here's where I'm at. Chop Robinson is right now the consensus big board number 28. Out on Chop Robinson.
I agree.
You can't talk me into Chop Robinson. I'm out. I think him at 38, him anywhere in the first, I'm out. That's a guy that for me, he's a buyer beware. Do not touch him. Do not draft him. I would also put in there, and this is going to sound weird because we've talked about we don't need cornerbacks, and I've been pretty high on the Missouri guys anyway. I'm not feeling Ennis Rexstraw at this next level. I can't get there. He's at pick 30. He's number 38 on the consensus big board. Not really feeling that. And I'm also pick 38. I could be talked into it, but I'm not feeling Edgerrin Cooper or Peyton Wilson at pick 38.
I knew you were going to say.
To me, I feel like they're very much both buyer beware categories for
Yep.
the rounds that we were talking about.
Timmy, hang on a second, because I've got some evidence here. I knew I could have written it down. He will mention Edgerrin Cooper as a guy you just stay away from in the first 2 rounds. So Timmy says, did you watch Brock Bowers? How the hell is he a risk? He was dominating as a freshman. Just because he's a tight end, you don't need to fear him. Look, here's the deal. Zach, tell Timmy who has been the biggest Brock Bowers proponent that you have known in like you. I've been obsessed with Brock Bowers for multiple seasons.
Yes.
The way his physicality, overall elite athleticism, and the injury track record is a concern for me. And I'm not saying that he's not worth it. I'm not saying that if somebody takes him at number 9, he won't be a great player. He absolutely could be. And he's the best player I've seen in college football last season. Fully healthy, best player in the game. Does that mean he's going to be a great NFL player? No. So you have to calculate the risk. And for me, at that position with Chig and with Josh Wiley, he's a risk as a first-round pick. He's a luxury pick almost.
To be clear, because Timmy's kind of like making his own. He's arguing with himself and making his own thing. It is injury history and the physical stature of Brock Bowers and holding up in the NFL. Not that he plays tight end.
Yeah.
Not that he played for Georgia or anything like that. Is those two things, and that is legitimate concerns you should have going to the NFL. I just want to make sure that we all understand that we do not care that he is a tight end. Because both of us understand there is such a thing as positionless football.
Yep. And like Gronkowski is an example of this. A guy that has elite, like you cannot, his athletic ability is infallible. Like you can't look at Rob Gronkowski and be upset about anything he does athletically. But what ended his career? And again, if they draft Brock Bowers and he ends up as a Rob Gronkowski career, you take it. But his career ended because he couldn't, because of a variety of things. And he was injured in college. Gronkowski was same thing. So, and guess what happened? He fell in the draft, and they get those guys. Where do all these great tight ends get drafted? They get drafted in the second round. They don't get drafted in the first round. So that's just one I would point out as there's a risk there. And I say that because I'm comfortable saying I've been as pro Brock Bowers as anybody covering the Titans as a fan of him as a player. But I agree with you on Chop Robinson. I've got him written down. I've also got Johnny Wilson written down, Xavier Legette written down. I'm not touching those guys in the second round. Tavondre Sweat's an interesting one. I'm really turned off right now by Tavondre
I don't
Sweat.
know why.
Call it a gut
He's
feel.
Good. He's good. He's full athletic for his size.
I know.
He's got the drive. He's got quick hands off the line. He is a 3 down. Maybe once he's a little bit more conditioned, but he has the technique and the ability to be a 3 down player. I do not understand this narrative that he's a 2 down only run stuffer, because that's not what he was in college.
I hear you.
He's better than Brian Murphy in college. That's all I'm going to say.
He was. It doesn't mean he's going to be better pro. Here's what's funny about the Texas players. Other than Byron Murphy, I don't like most of the Texas players from the top of the draft. You can add Brooks at running back. You can add Sanders at tight end. You can add both receivers and Sweat. I am a little bit, I'm going to say, bearish on those guys. Maybe at the top of the draft. The Texas players I like are at the end of the draft.
Sweat and Christian Jones will be the two best pros out of this Texas class.
I like Jones a lot. I also like the linebacker late too. If you're going 7th round, you can get you can get the linebacker late as well. So let me. So there's some names. Those are a lot of names that we would stay away from. Guys that we think could be busts, high risk players. We think the Titans should stay away from in the first and the second round. Okay, so let's get into these offensive lines. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group are 2 great sponsors here. Let's try this out, and I'm going to start with a question because I've got a scenario that I think fans need to be prepared for. That Joe Alt is off the board at 7.
Okay,
he is not available, and they are not taking a receiver. So I think we begin this conversation with Joe Alt being off the board, and either a trade back to 9 or drafting a lineman. So we'll start there with.
So I'm not allowed to do what common sense would dictate us. That's out. No common sense.
No. It's sort of a different question to start a different. It's sort of a separate topic. I wanted to hear your reaction. Hypothetically, Joe Alt goes 5 to the Chargers, and they don't want to take a receiver. What do you think happens? What do
Well,
you
first
think
off, they should all get fired in your scenario for not wanting to take one of the wide receivers.
what if
I would
Harrison
think
and
that it's gonna
Neighbors Harrison and Dunze are gone? Let's say two of them are gone. What's that?
well, then you take Neighbors. You run to the podium and take Neighbors. It's not that hard. I'll say this: if that's the case, you just take Fashanu or you trade back. I don't understand, I'm going on a big rant in stackinginbox.com tomorrow about this idea that Drake May isn't the second best quarterback, about this idea that Olu Fashanu is not the second best offensive tackle, this idea that Tavondre Sweat is just a 2-down run stuffer. Even I got that more here. You take Olu Fashanu. Like, he's always been the consensus second best offensive tackle.
Yep.
And he's always he would have been the best offensive tackle that came out last year. Olu Fashanu is good. Why is everybody overthinking this? And I will gladly stick and pick at 7 and take Olu Fashanu. Now, would I rather trade back? Yes. Would I definitely 100% take Neighbors over Olu? Yes, because I'm starting to lean towards I would take Neighbors over Alt.
No.
But at this point, Olu Fashanu is just a little, is like, he is the 1B, the borderline, just like 2 to Joe Alt. He always has been. And let me say something. If we all know, we know it, the national draft analysts know it because they talk about it all the time, that there is not a lot of movement on teams' big board leading into after the combine. And really, they're the most of the boards are set. Then why do analysts suddenly just go off the rails between after the combine and the draft and wildly change their stance on stuff? It just doesn't make sense. So I'm sticking with what I had at the very beginning of the year, and it hasn't really changed. I could understand that other teams aren't viewing it in such black and white terms because other teams have varying needs at offensive tackle. They have various scheme fits. They have various things that they like and traits. It's Joe Alt is number 1. Olu Fashanu is number 2. Stop overthinking it, America.
I agree. I think Fuaga's number 3. I think Latham's 4. I think that's it. I think that's the order. And then I think you could debate Mims or Guyton or whoever else you want in the back half of the first round. I think there's a very good chance that Joe Alt is gone and the Titans are not taking a receiver. I'm just saying. All right. I'm just saying.
I'd be very surprised in your scenario. I think that is one of the, I don't want to say least likely because trade backs are kind of always your least likely scenario in the draft because it takes 2 of them. So let's remove the trade back scenario out. I think them not taking one of the top 3 wide receivers if Alt is gone, I think that's so slim to none. It makes no sense.
I disagree. And
it makes no sense because we've heard them say stuff. It's like you're just throwing it away. You're throwing out their words, their actions, and just saying, I'm going to take a shit on this and light it and put it up on your door's back. I'm going to ring the doorbell and ditch it. That is my human shit on fire. But it is the words and actions of Rand Carthon and Brian.
No, what I think's good here. Look, I'm just saying, be prepared for the Joe Alt to go 5, the Titans to trade back to 9, the Bears to trade up to draft the 3rd receiver, and the Titans to take the tackle they want at 9.
I'm okay with a trade back. A trade back is different, but I'm saying if we remove the trade back, it's if Neighbors is there, they're drafting Neighbors, and Alt is gone.
Okay.
Because I mean, he's the perfect complement to both DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley right away, and he's clearly the better prospect than anything else that's left on the board.
I don't
necessarily in your scenario you provided Odunze and Marvin Harrison were gone as well as Joe Alt.
I think 2 of the 3 receivers will be gone. So it could be a Odunze versus Neighbors that's there. I don't know. I'm just saying I think people need to be prepared for Alt to be gone and for the Titans to trade away the last receiver to a team.
We've talked about the trade, trade away before.
All right,
I'm not disputing that.
So
I'm just saying that if they stick and pick.
So Alt and Fashanu at 7. And then let's say 9, 11, or 13, hypothetically. What's the name you want? To me, it's Fuaga. That's the guy I want.
I mean, if you trade back to 9, I kind of feel like Olu's still going to be there, so I would still say that. I'm not sure if Neighbors would be there. I kind of feel like someone may jump up to even draft Neighbors or Odunze. Of course, if you trade with the Bears, they're going to take a wide receiver, right?
Bingo.
in that scenario, there you go. So I'd still pick Olu at 10. I think other guys are like Latham. I think I'd be fine with Brock Bowers, in that you said 10, 11, 12 range. I'd be fine with it. It's not going to, it's something that like I'm going to have to like get pumped for because it's not, but I think it's going to work, right? Like it's not something that gets me like really, really excited, but it's something
he's a
that
good
I'm
player.
like,
He's a good player.
he's a good player. I know it's going to
Yeah.
work in this team. On this team, he's going to make plays. He adds an extra dimension
All
to
right.
the offense. But I'm really zoned in on those offensive linemen. I think if you want to get real frisky with it, and Jared Verse is right there, I'd be in on some Jared Verse.
Over Fuaga?
No, I don't think so.
I think
I'd
four
still
tackles.
go Fuaga.
I think 4 tackles have to be gone before I consider anything else. If
Yeah,
I'm at 13 or 15,
agree.
if I'm at 13 or 15, the only way I'm considering Dallas Turner, Brock Bowers, Brian Thomas, something else other than tackle is if the top 4 are gone, and that is Alt, Olu Fashanu, Fuaga, and J.C. Latham. At that point, I'm okay with anything.
Do you think that who do they have as the best player available? Jared Verse or Fuaga Latham?
I think they have.
Matters.
I think they have Latham and Fuaga ahead of Verse.
Okay.
I don't know about
as long as you think that, then there you go.
What I don't know about is Mims. I don't know. I think teams could have Mims top 5. I think teams could have Mims outside the top 30. I don't. The range on Mims is going to be very broad because he just hasn't played a lot, and I think that's the question with him. So, and for Titans fans, I hate this shit because it's stupid and I hate it. So I'm just going to say how much I hate it. But the second you draft Mims, all you're going to hear about is Isaiah Wilson, and I hate that nonsense. Like C.J. Stroud is not a good quarterback because all the other Ohio State quarterbacks were bad. Like there's nothing to do. They're not related. They're not connected in any way. They are all separate individual players. That is what it is. Now, if at 38 you're picking an offensive lineman, who are you picking? Because I think this is Kingsley or Patrick Paul, and I think that's the 2 you're looking at.
So I got a guy that I think is going to fall out of the first round, and I don't like him in the first round, but I could be talked into him at 38, and that'd be Tyler Guyton.
Okay.
I think Tyler Guyton is a guy that I have fallen out of the first round. I'm gonna be. It's probably once I put in my final mock draft, it's probably gonna be pretty hard to actually figure out who's gonna go up above him. But I kind of feel like Patrick Paul's gonna sneak into the first, and Tyler Guyton's gonna fall out.
I could see that.
So I would go Tyler Guyton, Kingsley Suamataia, then Patrick Paul in that order in the second round.
Okay. I would go Paul, Guyton, Suamataia. My question is, where does the Yale kid Kieran Amagdije? I don't know how to say his name. Jordan Morgan, is he a tackle? I don't know.
He's a guard. He's got sub 33 arms. He's a guard.
Is there an interior offensive lineman that if they fall to you at 38, you're interested in? Especially if you already have, let's say you already have Fuaga or Latham or Olu in the first round. Do you want to?
If Graham Barton fell, but he's not going to fall. But if like Graham Barton's there at 38, you run to the podium and you take him.
Okay,
because there you put him at right guard, but I don't think he's going to fall. And really, Jordan Morgan, I mean, he would have to learn a new side and a new position. I think I would be out on that. So no interior offensive lineman. I don't have any interior offensive lineman. I'm really. I have one that's kind of a flex guy, but I really don't have any interior offensive linemen. They got Raiden, Sadiq Charles. You never know. Jalen Duncan may have to pitch in at guard at some point if he can't win a tackle spot. I just
what if you end
right
up
now just not feeling it.
What if you end up with not your number one choice in the first or second round, and you draft 2 offensive tackles, but you get your second choice in both rounds? So you get Olu Fashanu in the first round and Kingsley Suamataia in the second round. How good do you feel?
I feel pretty good. I think that's if you get both those guys, you feel pretty good about it. The guy from Yale, I don't know where I land on him, and I'm gonna have to try to find some more all 22 and stuff. I'm not really feeling him.
And I don't think there's another name that I really like after Suamatia Paul, and I guess I'd throw Morgan in there if he's your second tackle, right? If you draft Alt or Fashanu at 7 or 9 or whatever, and you come
At that
back and get
point,
Morgan, you can move him around.
I think to me, it's just be like, just see what you got in NPF and Raidens, and then waste that pick on Jordan Morgan.
Well,
it's a hope and a prayer. You're hoping for an outlier, and this is not a team that really needs to be hoping for outliers.
The key with Morgan is you'd have to have him graded really high on your board to take him as a second tackle. Like to take another offensive lineman at 38.
And even as a right guard, you'd have to have him highly graded.
You'd have to grade him real high. Yep. I agree.
I don't see the path for Jordan Morgan on this team.
All right, 106. Christian Jones or bust?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's where I'm at. It's Christian Jones in the 4th. Let me just say this: if you were to go in the 3rd and you were to get a 3rd round, I think I would go Blake Fisher.
Okay.
I think that in the 3rd round, Blake Fisher's a guy. He may drop to the 4th. You never know, but he's a guy that has left and right side versatility. So if he was your second offensive lineman, compared to the first one, like Christian Jones, that's a guy right there. I would do with Blake Fisher and Christian Jones right there in the 4th. But that's about it. You talk about positional versatility. Dominic Puny is a guy that I could be talked into on the 4th. On these guys, he may be able to find him a home at right tackle. Okay, so you may be able to find him at home at right tackle, but he could be your right guard. He could be a center when you need him. And in the 4th round, if you're getting a guy that can come in and start somewhere on the offensive line, either right away or due to injury, that's still good value. And while Christian Jones is a pure right tackle, Dominic Puny is a name to watch that could play pretty much almost anywhere on that offensive line.
Older player, 24 years old, has got more reps, which is not a bad thing.
Never allowed a sack since he became an offensive lineman. That includes high school. Never has allowed a sack.
I think if you get a tackle in the 1st round, I think once you start looking at picks 106, picks 146, and 182, which is 4th, 5th, and 6th round, I do think there's an interior offensive lineman option there that are available. Mason McCormick is a really interesting player, potential guy, interior offensive lineman there, I believe out of South Dakota. Cooper Beebe could be available out of Kansas State at 106. Zach Zinter, who's coming off the injury, was an extremely good offensive lineman for Michigan. You might be able to get him a little bit later on, maybe at 146, maybe somewhere in there. I think there's some really interesting interior offensive linemen that you're looking at 146 and 182. If you're talking about getting a second lineman to bolster and add depth, you're there. If you're trying specifically to just acquire a second tackle in the draft, I think it has to be Christian Jones. It's got to be Christian Jones at 106, and you can't wait after that. I think you have to take him at 106 if he's still there.
If you are and I agree, like if you're looking for a guy that could come in and likely beat out NPF and Jalen Duncan in year 1 over the summer, then yes. But if you're looking to add a couple of guys that could maybe compete for that with those guys, I would say a guy like Matt Goncalves, who I just realized I'd be calling Matt Gonclaves all fucking year. Matt Goncalves or Goncalves or whatever. I think he's a guy in the 5th round that makes sense. I look at guys like Caden Wallace, Tylen Grable, Travis Glover, Ethan Driscoll, 6th, 7th round guys that can probably be a guy that is going to come in, compete with NPF and Jalen Duncan, and still have a good shot to win. But they may not be completely ready, but they have all the intangibles and they have sound technique as well for the most part. For prospects, usually fine, because like Jalen Duncan's technique was a mess. But these guys have at least a little bit higher technique floor than Jalen Duncan. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like a guy like Caden Wallace is really intriguing. He has really good athleticism. Same with Tylen Grable. So I wouldn't be too surprised. I think they do walk away with 2 tackles. I think it's a day 1 and a day 3 guy that they walk away with. Yeah. And I think that both the day one and the day three guy have. No, the day one guy can, but I think the day three guy has a really good shot of beating out NPF and or Jalen Duncan.
And honestly, what you're kind of looking for is someone who profiles well alongside those guys, right? Because like we know Radens is going to play guard, so maybe that's the reason you don't take an interior offensive lineman, because you feel like you have, Cushenberry, Skoronski, Brunskill, and Radens that you feel comfortable about that. Again, I could see an interior piece being added, but let's say you feel good about that. What NPF and Duncan have? They're both really, they're like moldable balls of clay. They're really good athletics. Third and fourth round picks. Like you're looking for a guy who's in the similar, or I guess it's sixth round pick for Jalen Duncan, fifth round pick, one of the two. And you you're looking for somebody who profiles similarly at 106 or 146 in the same type of mold as a player. And then you got three really good athletes that Bill Callahan can work with to mold into a right tackle. And I do think that gives you enough. Now, if you end up with like a free agent, in all of this, Andrews Pete, let's say, like you've mentioned, and then all of a sudden you get a tackle in the first round and then a long shot tackle in the seventh round, you're feeling really good about where your offensive line has been. And D Good says you picked a poor episode to not have Stoney on. And I would argue every episode is a bad episode to not have Stoney on. You need Stoney on everything.
And I just throw a few more names out there on that day three,
sixth,
seventh round. Delmar Glaze, Josiah Ezram are two guys that profile really highly for what the Tennessee Titans look for specifically on the field. In the on-field metrics. Obviously, Olu Talisi and Joe Walter and Amaris Mims are the top four, but then it goes Delmar Glaze, Josiah Ezram right there. And Caden Wallace isn't too far behind, neither is Tylen Grable or Ethan Driscoll. So just some names to put out there of guys that may not be technically on your radar. We have talked about Delmar Glaze during the Senior Bowl week. We have not talked about a lot of Josiah Ezram, but I know that Stoney's about to I think he actually just finished up right before we came on an article talking about Josiah Ezram some. But he's a guy that both those guys' profile fits really well. And if they're there on day three, they may not be guys that you want to wait around to maybe see if they become undrafted free agent. 6th and 7th round are kind of those rounds where you take a guy that you're like, I don't want them to hit undrafted free agency. I want to tie them up now under contract.
Well, and when you pick 182, which is their 6th round pick, that gives you a big jump on all those guys. And then you have 3 7th, so you could at 221, your first one, that's the one where you could take the flyer on the undrafted guy, because then you still have 2 more picks to get the sort of guy that would be in the 7th round anyway. So you have a lot of options here on day number 3 with a bunch of picks on that day. I will say, just again, reminder, I know everybody knows this, it is way easier to find a starting or replacement level center or guard on day 3 than it is to find a tackle. That's just the way it is. Otherwise, make sure you check out, it sounds like, some really good, interesting offensive line content coming from Stoney on stackingtheinbox.com. You can check out all of Zach's work at Stacking the Inbox, as well as F Words Pod and at paulkarski.com. Sinkers Beverages, the tickets are in the YouTube comment section. We have sold, I think, half, Zach, of our Friday night allotment for the Friday night gathering.
Right.
We sold half of them. And the link's not even public. It's just on our show for you, the listener. So if you want in, we only have a limited number. It's going to be a ton of fun. Off the record commentary, special guest, bourbon, watching day 2 of the draft. It's going to be a lot of fun. So check out the links there. And then Thursday night, it's going to be a bigger party, a little bit cheaper, just as fun, but different type of vibe. So come on, you can check tickets out for there as well. Kingston Group, buildkg.com. And I think that's about it. I think check out the YouTube page. Give us a subscription there. We really, really appreciate it. We're going to continue looking at positions and sort of how we work our way through positions and give you some targets for each position in each round, just like we kind of focused on the offensive line here. So finally, Chef Rand joins the commentary. Good to see you, Chef Rand.
A little late. I'm a little disheartened that he came here so late.
I know. Hopefully he's been hanging out and watching. Otherwise, appreciate all you guys for all your commentary and your questions. We cannot wait for the draft. It cannot get here soon enough. So
yes,
otherwise,
I'm ready for this fucking draft.
Yes. Otherwise, everybody check out all the things I just told you to check out. For Zach, I am Braden. For Kingston Group at Sinkers Beverages, thank you guys all for listening. We will talk to you on Thursday. Have a good one.